Seeing Forest is an exhibition that I've been working on for quite some time, and it's mainly about my experience documenting the forests in Singapore, specifically secondary forests. Seeing Forest is kind of like a result of all these years of researching, documenting, and thinking about the secondary forests here in Singapore.
As we enter this iteration of the exhibition, we encounter a sort of tree map of sorts, and you titled it A Guide to Secondary Forests in Singapore. Could you walk us through this very complex but very interesting tree map?
So this is a digital drawing that I did to give a kind of plan view or God's eye view perspective of the things that are happening in the show, but also the very close view of things that are happening in and around the forest, which are so many things, so many layers, histories, ecology, animal life, human life, many stories that constitute what the forest is. Then I realized actually, since most of the trees in the secondary forest of Singapore is a single species, it's the albizia tree, I kind of also wanted to talk about that as well. So that's why the map looked like how it looked like in the show.
So, Robert, talk us through the material but also the process of kind of conceiving this work. Can you talk us through what's actually going on and what have you recorded?
So when I was doing a residency at CCA in 2016, the forest just behind my studio, there was actually a dustbin there. The bin must have been there for maybe 5-6 years, I think. Suddenly one day I just put a camera there, just wanted to see what's happening in the bin, and then I realized a host of animals in the forest use the bin to drink water, to shower, to play, and the residents of the forest kind of use it as a kind of a watering hole. And as for the objects, right, whenever I walk in the secondary forest, sometimes on the floor, every day, even you walk the same path, after the rain, things will emerge. But they're all trash, rubbish that we have thrown into the forest a long time ago. For this particular pile here, actually this all belonged to the man that lived in the forest. These are quite recent, I think they are from the 90s. And it's all alcohol that he drank when he was staying there, and it was laid out in stacks, nice stacks. There must be a few hundred of them. But what was really interesting was when we were just taking the bottles out of the forest, we realized that there were little frog eggs that were inside one of the bottles. And we've seen these little frogs around, so that's why there's this acrylic frog there. And also in the video, we have a time-lapse of these little eggs becoming frogs. So it became kind of a micro-habitat for this introduced species. So I thought like every little object that we leave behind in the forest, it may be rubbish, it may be trash, literally a trash can, but somehow when you leave it long enough, nature has a way to make it useful at its own terms again. So that was what I was kind of interested in. How that history is there, but at the same time, life emerges on top of it.
One of the things that struck me was how you said that you wanted to challenge this notion that the secondary forest is less important, or it's too new to have anything that is ecologically diverse or even fascinating. And over all these years of sort of observing secondary forests, what might be some of the kind of key takeaways or pleasures you have received from that observation?
Secondary forest is often seen as a lesser forest than a primary forest, meaning that a primary forest is untouched by man, but secondary forest emerges from activities of man, so it's always seen as not as good. But this is purely a human idea. Try telling it to the animals and plants that land there that, do you know that you're not in an ideal habitat? For them, these are very I don't know, strange concepts that actually don't make sense for them. And also, we have to understand that these landscapes are disturbed already by man. So it's actually very tough for any plants or animals that are native sometimes to kind of learn to thrive in a landscape like that. So whoever can thrive in that actually is doing, I think is doing us a favor, because it naturally happens. We don't have to maintain it, we don't have to water it, you know. Life just kind of grow on its own terms.
I've also noticed how you include these animals, your observation, not almost as a person passively observing, but it's as if you're, interviewing or profiling these animals as well. Do you often find that that is an approach, the idea of ensuring that, you're not just gazing alone, but that they are also looking back or in a way responding? So I guess my question is, do you find these sort of wildlife or creatures that you have recorded like your collaborators in a project?
I think if they are collaborators, they are unwilling collaborators. I think what's most important for me is that the secondary forest is actually, it's not a very human space. It is a space that is for actually all these native introduced species of animals and plants. They are the key stakeholders, and whether or not they are native or endangered species, I have very little respect for that kind of hierarchy. I just feel like any kind of life that can emerge from a space that we degraded previously is something worth celebrating, especially in this day of mass extinction and we are losing species. Anything that can occur on its own is always something that we should, I feel I want to look at carefully.
How do you think your practice, of seeing, of observing, relate to or address the concerns of the current ecological kind of moment? Sometimes we feel like there's a sense of urgency, but we also feel a lot of helplessness as well.
Somehow, as an artist, it feels so hard to contribute meaningfully to the ecological discourse, and especially in Singapore, where we can't witness much of this impacts, on the environment. How, as a Singaporean artist, can you meaningfully contribute, and how can art kind of really help? So, for me, during the pandemic, that's when I started to stare out of that piece of forest just outside my window. And then I realized that it's not static, it's alive. And it took my 5-year-old son to teach me to see that although it's so impossible for that space to have life, it still manages to have life. What I realized I can do is to start to tell stories, but not as a scientist would. Just stories about how actually life is just everywhere in Singapore, especially here where nature and urbanity is always so close. And I think once you start to realize that everything doesn't need to be human-centric, I hope things can start to change in the way that we kind of feel or think about nature.
For Sharon Chin, her own garden became a site for observation and reflection. In Creatures on the Move, everyday animals in her garden in Port Dickson, Malaysia, transform into important messengers for the community.
So Creatures on the Move is a series of wheat-pasted images on the walls of the gallery showing animal shadow puppets, but they are lit by nothing but the light from the flare of the refinery that's right next door to us. We're about 200 meters from the fence. So at night, the flare stack of the refinery lights up the whole sky, enough to actually backlight those shadow puppets that we see in the gallery.
Creatures on the Move in the Death of Night. Can you talk a bit about the title of the work?
So it's the idea of we've killed the night with our electric lights, with our urban sprawl. So we don't experience true darkness anymore, and neither do the animals that we share space with. Especially living next to the refinery, it burns 24/7. It never sleeps. And I find neither do we. I think we are now existing in the death of night. What happens to our dreams when we don't have true darkness and true night? What happens to our sleep, our rest, our cycles of downtime, and how that affects us when we are on 24/7, burning through our life, our resources, and the planet. We actually did shoot these shadow puppets in the dead of night. I remember at about 3 a.m., as we were shooting the puppet with the frog, a chorus of toads just sang out, heralding like, oh, rain is coming. And sure enough, like after we finished shooting that puppet, we could feel the moisture in the air and it started to rain. So we have companions, we have audiences. Yeah, we are not alone. The abundance of biodiversity and life against the backdrop of the fossil fuel industry, it's very evocative, I think, of our lived experience here. So that's what that work is about.
Sharon, I know that some of the ideas that you've been sharing about, you've been thinking about for a long time. Can you tell me more about the different iterations that Creatures on the Move has gone through?
Yeah, I'd say this Creatures series has been going on for years, so maybe like 8 years, almost a decade back. And they began as a lino cut. So the animal designs that are in Creatures on the Move actually began as a print for this book, Creatures of New Kingdoms, that my partner Zidax Yu wrote and I illustrated. These are the animals that we've encountered in the neighborhood. So it began as this print in 2018, and then to placards that are taken out on the streets for a climate rally in Kuala Lumpur, to finally this work, images of actual shadow puppets shot here in Port Dickson, in the school next door, and then they're in the gallery. So that's like a whole journey, a trajectory to them. Yeah, these animals from the neighborhood going to the city, and then going to the National Gallery. I think with the climate crisis that we're facing now, and how the fossil fuel industry is central to that, because fossil fuels are central to our civilization. There's a sense of like, where we want to transition away from fossil fuels, but we can't actually figure out the way how. So we're in a relationship with our source of energy. And rather than making a protest statement against fossil fuels, I really wanted to go deeper into these cycles of energy exchange, what actually powers our civilization, how it relates us to non-human life, the effect on us humans, but also the effect on the animals and the plants that we share space with.
I really see the animals and creatures in your work almost as protagonists of these stories that you're trying to share. Would you consider them almost as collaborators? How did you kind of work with them through this whole process?
Yeah, I think of them as neighbors. Yeah, they're our neighbors, and they have their own drama. Like, that's what this book is about. So it's all about, they're fictional stories, but they come out of the intimacy with the animals in the day-to-day.
And of course, I know you're still continuing to think about some of these protagonists and creatures. Can you share a bit more about how you're thinking about them now in your new series of works here?
They're evolving, the creatures, and I'm in the process of printing the editions of the lino cuts that are in here. Okay, so these are just some of the lino cuts that are in the book. This ghost cat one is one of the earliest ones that I worked on, and it's about our beloved cat Penyu, who passed away, but we still feel her presence around, so we wanted to remember her in some way. And of course, like the front and the back page, end pages of Creatures of Near Kingdoms is this lino cut of the animals in the neighborhood. So these ones are not fictitious. They're actually the animals that we've observed in our garden and surrounded by the 2 flash stacks of the refinery. When I made this lino cut in 2018, the refinery had 2 flash stacks, but today there are 3. So that's like another change that has happened over time. In the meantime, yes, the animals are still around. We're still living with them. Yeah, still being their neighbors. We have the snake, and we have a local name for this reticulated python. It's Tok Batik. Tok is the honorific, grandfather, grandmother, batik, because the beautiful design on the python resembles batik. And so it's like a respectful name for this creature. It shows that there's a healthy respect for this animal. And we have those names for different creatures as well, like the tiger, we used to call Pak Belang. Pak Belang is like grandfather stripes. So we never call their actual name. I think these names like sort of show this intimate relationship, like one of respect, one of like kin, I think. Yeah, this like intimate relationship.
It makes me wonder what names the animals have for us also.
Exactly.
If you could describe Creatures on the Move in just one word, what would it be?
Change. Change.